Hello, 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 hello. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Hold on, always double checking. You come online, and one of the first things you have to do is just double check that everything is working because you think it's working, but it's not a given that it's actually working. So, welcome, 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 everyone. It's me, Tigria Gardenia, and this is another beautiful episode of our plant consciousness commentary. All right, as always, I'm just, again, double checking everything just to make sure things are working because, that's just the way it is. You have to double check it. So it's Friday. We're here. I have a paper all queued up. But first and foremost, how is everybody? How was your week? It's been an interesting week, to say the least. I felt very, very inspired, to be honest, about everything that I was doing today. But I, at the same time as feeling super inspired, also am we're feeling really behind. I have some big projects coming up and have been taking up a lot of my time, which I think is exciting. At least I feel like the projects are exciting. I have some new work that I'm doing with my team to sort of revitalize the look. And I'm also have a very big upcoming meeting at Dom and Her that I am planning for as Dom and Her International and also as a liaison with the School of Method Action, which is our initiatic path. And that part of it is, let's just say that there's a lot to do there. So, but that doesn't matter because at the same time, I just prepared everything for the next episode of the podcast, which is going to be amazing. It's so excited to share Evgenia Emets with you all here. And then also to have a conversation. I had a conversation for the next episode with somebody who I just met, and it was just such a good conversation. I didn't know that there's just so many artists now working with plants, which is very interesting because remember, you know how I go through all of this plant consciousness commentary. I've pretty much just tried to go in order of when the plant papers were published as much as I can, at least staying year-wise in it. And the last few, as you've noticed, have been all connected to performance, which I find fascinating. And the next one, today's, is also connected to performance. So today's plant consciousness commentary is also going to be based in this whole idea of plants and curation of plants in a performance space. I've been having many, many discussions with different artists, and I think that that's been one of the most exciting aspects for me is to get into these deep conversations with these artists to understand their process and how many of them are, what exactly they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it, how important the element of play is, and just completely different aspects of it. So this has been something exciting for me to discover all of these artists. And at the same time, there has been such a strong energy coming from very specific, I don't know about for you, I'd love to hear it if it's happening for you, but some specific plants are really speaking right now. I think because it's summer, I think that for us in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summer. And I think a lot of the plants are kind of just with everything that's happening in the world, they're being extremely active. I was going back now, like I said, prepping the podcast episode with Evgenia, and Evgenia was talking about how the way she works with plants is very much connected to this conversation that happens. And I was thinking about that, about like she feels the call from a specific plant or a forested area that calls to her and asks her for her to be the medium of a message. And she talks a lot. She has a very deep conversation through dreams with the plant before she ever starts to create any kind of artwork. And I really appreciated her process. But in doing that, I was thinking about my own work and how certain plants are coming in really strong right now. And it's similar. I'm feeling very much like kin are calling me. I have a plant. I'm trying to remember. It's in the cactus family. It's I'll find the name and I will publish it for you. But this is a plant which it's a cactus with one very long stem. And I woke up yesterday morning and came in. I need to take a picture of this because Unfortunately, I don't have my phone on me right now, so I can't even do this, and I can't flip the camera. But this plant, who's usually this long stem like this, is now completely bent over my laptop with these two shoots that are coming out, and bent completely over my laptop as if the plant is coming towards me. And usually this is a plant that I see. I have to find this plant. I just literally did the search to find the name because no, us. Darn it. Okay, hold on a second because I have to figure it out because I have to show you this. It's just it's too amazing not to see. So I have to kind of figure out how I can do this. Let me see if I can take a picture so you can kind of get an idea of what is happening here. I'm going to have to show it to you on my phone, but that's not it. Where is the phone picture? Okay. Like, check that out. Can you see that? Look at that. Look at it's Key is just decided to completely go over the top of my laptop and reach out and touch someone. It's like what just happened here? Why is that happening? Yeah, it's right. So like it seems like Jill's also having it. They're also reaching out. And it's amazing to see this because this plant has just sort of decided that, this is the way we're going to communicate right now. I'm here, and has completely reached over my laptop. And it's like, what is happening? I mean, seriously, look at that. Look at that. That is crazy. Just this is a plant that the day before was standing straight up, and is on my desk. So I see this plant every day, goes over my big screen. So it's not like I don't notice Key, but obviously Key wants me to speak and to have some kind of dialogue. And we shall continue our discussions. So this is what I'm living with right now. Okay, so that being said, let's start with our paper because we've got lots to do. Oh, definitely it is time. And Jill is absolutely right. Wants my attention, desperately. Yes, big attention. And it seems to be that there's something strange going on in this area because it's summertime. So it's hot. Finally, the heat finally kicked in. So you can feel the heat. And it's not raining as much. We had some torrential rains that were coming through, but it's almost as if the soil is wet still. There's such a proliferation of water in this area, and that I don't feel it as much as I did a few weeks ago in the atmosphere, but even in the pots, the soil is damp. So everybody is getting overwatered, and it's really interesting to see, if you watch the episode of the podcast where I was talking about emotions and cattail and chickweed and it feels very, and it feels very, very, very connected. Like there's this water element that's really pushing through, and that the plants are being very, it's as if the plants are trying to help us navigate this emotional landscape. That's the feeling I keep getting from bulrush, from cattail. I got it from chickweed. Now I'm getting it from, I want to say your name is, why didn't I not? Should have looked up when I was here. I can do this. There we go. There's the name. Opuntia subulata. Opuntia here, little Missy, is being very moving through. Ooh, and Michelle says she's working on another Plantisapien. If you don't know what the Plantisapiens are, you have to head over to the Naturally Conscious community to go see the Plantisapiens. The Plantisapiens are these beautiful, amazing creations that Michelle Kirby has been making after we read the book Plantisapiens by Paco Calvo in the Plant Wisdom Book Club. And you have to go see the Plantisapiens. And Plantisapiens are these, well, you just go head over to the Naturally Conscious community, check it out. So looks like she's working on a succulent. I love it. I am excited to see a new succulent that's going to come through because, I think cactus was the last one you did, Michelle. So I'm excited to see this happen. All right, let's get started on our paper. We have lots and lots to go through. This is a paper that has a fair amount of pages. So let me move you over here. Here you are. This is, and then let me set up not you. Oh, go away. View. I think it's this one. There's two modes, and I always forget which is which. Which one's better than the other. This one is. This is the mood. Okay, so here we are. We're in performance philosophy. Hold on, let me mark something down. 10, 28. So we are in performance philosophy is the name of the journal that this came out in. This is a 2020 paper. Believe it or not, we made it all the way to 2020. I did skip a few, by the way. I have. There's just a few really, really good ones that I'm holding off because I want to do them as a collection. And this one felt good to do now. We're going to be moving into some pretty interesting space when we walked into 2021. So I've got a few that are older, including even as old as 1979, queued up. I keep saying this, and I know that at some point I'm going to have to be going to more times a week if we're going to really cover as many papers as we need to paper. But yeah, I'm just not there yet. And really, honestly, to do that, I need more. It would be nice to have a little more support. So make sure you hit that like button if you haven't done that yet. Hit the like, the subscribe button, share this, encourage others to watch it. Because, that helps move everything along. And also please join the Naturally Conscious community, because like I said, that's where we continue on in these conversations, and we're having more in-depth conversations about these major topics. So that being said, let's move into this. Oops, hold on. I'm trying to get the sizing right. I think this works. Okay, we're going to go with that. I'm going to make myself little. So this is called Rooted Hauntology Lab. Isn't that a great name? Rooted Hauntology Lab. I keep expecting something creepy and scary. But that's just me because I have that kind of mind. So this is Attempts at Vegetal Curation. And this is by Ingrid Vranken. I have read some, no, I don't think I've done them as part of the commentary. I have to go and check, but I know that I have read another paper by Ingrid Vranken because I remember the name. I don't know how I remember the name, just sometimes they stick in my head. So, but this is exciting because this is a completely different type of paper from some of the others. So I have only read maybe about the first 20 words just to make sure that it's valid. I like to read them with you so that we get, you get my full reaction. Okay. We live in extractivist times. All right, so obviously Ingrid is going to, be very gentle with her words, or obviously not. We live in extractivist times. The Western way of living is based on taking and consuming without providing the elements for regeneration. Alberto Acosta gives us the most comprehensible definition of extractivism. Those activities which remove large quantities of natural resources that are not processed or processed only to a limited degree, especially for export. Extractivism is not limited to minerals or oil. Extractivism is also present in farming, forestry, and even fishing. I would say it's even beyond that. I mean, we're even in an extractivist world when we think about our own knowledge base. I mean, we're literally mining people for knowledge and then throwing them off to the side. It's kind of nuts. A mechanism of colonial and neo-colonial plunder and appropriation. And this is why I said that it's not just only in the physical space. It's also in the non-physical space. We are burning our way through fossil fuels, primary resources, and humans. See, there you go. She finally got on. She added it. We are burning our way through humans. We are taking from the earth at a speed which does not allow for regeneration, with the well-known dramatic destruction consequences. As a curator, I realize that the Western performing arts world is no exception to this way of functioning. Artists are making work that critiques neoliberal capitalism, and institutions organize festivals on topics such as climate change. However, often the politics issues and utopias that are brought to the stage are not reflected in the conditions and context in which the work is created and presented. Artists are working in increasingly precarious circumstances. Many of them feel that the financial and other stresses they are under are in contrast with the perceived wealth and stability of arts institutions. And these institutions are not sufficiently redistributing their resources towards a diverse group of artists. The growing gap in the arts field risks to leave the field divided and weak. This is interesting because I was literally just having a conversation with, who was it? Just today, I was having a conversation about, no, excuse me, it was yesterday. So yesterday I recorded the podcast, and the artist, who is also a scientist, he's an artist, scientist, has various different master's degrees, really interesting person, Antonio Irre. And in our conversation, we were talking about this because we were talking about it from two fields. One is from the perspective of the scientific need to produce um, positive results in order to get more funding. And also from the artistic perspective, the need to enter into certain types of topics, but that to really focus on where I can get, where I can get the money for what it is that I want to do. And this is such a terrible situation that we're in, because the fact that we have to do this means, as you can already imagine, that the funding guides the type of work that you do. So that's another part of the extractivism. I am extracting what is useful and not necessarily doing what I think could be the most impactful or necessary. And I think that this is a really difficult aspect. And I think it happens in all areas of life, but I see it more pronounced in places where your ability to gather funds to do things are based on somebody's evaluation of not just your product, like what you produce, but whether what you produce is within certain guidelines. I don't know how to explain that. I just still think it's worse in the arts. It's difficult. This growing gap in the arts field risks to leave the field divided and weak. In the past years, multiple stories of power abuse have come to light, partly thanks to the power of the Me Too movement, while the rates of burnout within the artist field keep increasing. On an ecological level, and I'm sure that this is talking a lot about things like the Harvey Weinstein trial and all these other situations where people, especially women, are forced into precarious situations in order to ensure that they have the funding that they need for their arts work, regardless of whatever kind of arts work that is. And it's, it's a tale as old as time, unfortunately. It's a tale as old as time. On the ecological level, there is still very little awareness of the materials we use to produce our art, let alone a mature, in-depth discussion about the travel habits of our field. Thanks to the efforts of activists such as Fossil Free Culture, we are aware of the continuous financing of the art world by fossil fuel companies. The art world participates in the neoliberal practices of power abuse, where people are being squeezed for their time and talents and thrown aside when exhausted, and in the use of natural resources without taking responsibility for the renewal of the ecosystem and societies they are taken from. There is a gap between the politics performed on stage and those lived backstage, between strong ethical choices made in private lives and the lack thereof of professional lives. This is, you know how I keep saying over and over again to you that many of the discussions connected to really looking at plants as co-creators and working with plants very intimately is connected to the fact that there are hard discussions that we don't want to have. One of the hardest discussions that I myself live through is being coherent, being true to my word in the things that I say and the things that I express and how I live my life. It is very, very, very difficult. I was eating last night something that I purchased at a local store from a local company, and yet I know, or that's not true, I am not 100% sure the ethical lives in this particular case of, in this case, it was an animal product, of the animal that was. Normally when I eat, for example, as many of you know, I am omnivorous. And when I eat, I especially when I'm home, I do my hardest to purchase from places where I know the relationship with the animals. And I myself, in order to feel comfortable with the fact that I take a life in order to eat, I have taken life and been a part of that process of raising, taking care of, being a part of the life of the animal and as well as the plants, right? I have grown my own food in the nucleos that I've lived in, both having relationships with the plants and the animals, because to me they're all the same level, right? Kin or kin. All of them are conscious. All of them have sentience. All of them are aware, and therefore, to me, it's the relationship that's most important. But it is so hard to do that, obviously, in all of your food choices. And that's an extreme example because it's one of the hardest things to control. But even just in day to day, the books that I read, my clothing that I wear, all of these aspects. So I can come here and speak to you about kin are at my same level while I'm looking around my desk that has sheets of paper and pencils made of wood and, other aspects that came from plants. And I have to be honest, it is my constant, I don't know, film that's going through my head when I go to purchase things. Some of them we can have already choices and conversations. For example, I use the pencil that I use the most is this sprout pencil that has seeds, and the seeds already came. Oh, sorry. The seeds already came out. This was sage seeds. And so I planted the seeds, and then eventually I'm going to put the pencil back in the earth. Now, is the pencil compostable, recyclable? There's nothing that can't be used? Absolutely. But do I know how the plant that made this pencil was treated? No, I don't. That's as far as I can get in the society that we live in today. I don't know how to make my own pencil. So even though I choose a pencil over a pen, and when I do use pens, I have refillable pens, and I use very few of them. I'm a pencil girl because I believe it's better. But still, I don't have all the details. This is extremely hard. It's frustrating. It's difficult. And this is only a choice. As opposed to going back to our paper, we are talking about people whose lives come and are like their livelihood is based on somebody giving them money. And therefore, like she says here, if the arts is being financed by fossil fuel companies and you're taking that money to create an environmentally friendly production or a production about something that is to bring eco-consciousness, the contradiction is stark and it's in your face. What do? Not take the money and potentially not make that particular piece of art and not bring that focus? Or do you take the money and say, well, I'm going to take the money, but I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to use it for a good cause? These are hard discussions, super hard discussions. Starting from the conviction that the context in which artistic work is created is defining the work itself, I began to co-work with plants because of their different relation to presence, absence, visibility, time, and generosity in order to shape a curational practice that tries to resist the self-exploitation of human and other than human resources. For this, I needed to reconsider long-established hierarchies and practices through shaping relations and ethics differently. I turned toward plants and ghosts as my teachers. Ghosts? Ghost? Did she say ghost? She wrote ghost. What kind of ghost? Like paranormally ghost? Like ghost? Like Casper the Friendly Ghost? And now I'm so curious. What kind of ghost are we talking about here? Plants and ghosts as my teachers and allies who could point me towards strategies of being with, generosity, and sympoiesis. Rooted Hauntology Lab as an artistic curatorial project is both the result and ongoing practical playground for this experimentation. The lab was created 2 years ago within the context of my master's studies at DAS Theater in Amsterdam. The lab has currently produced 2 lecture performances in collaboration with different artists, workshops, writings, artist residencies, and a seance. A seance. We are talking about ghosts. Ooh, I picked a good paper, huh? I picked a good paper. We're talking about plants and ghosts in the same paper. Oh, that's exciting. That's exciting. That's exciting. It is an ongoing project that, up until now, has been realized with minimal financial, material, and institutional means. It is undeniable that, in the context of my master's studies, has strongly shaped the first iterations of the lab, and as it will travel through collaborations with other organizations and institutions in the coming time, new insights will be gained, and the practices of the lab will be further developed. This paper describes those personal attempts so far. So, moving into rooting. I am fascinated by plants. Well, me too, Ingrid. I am also fascinated by plants. I'm fascinated with plants, by plants, as plants. I mean, I am fascinated. I am with you. These beings who have developed such diverse and successful ways of being on this planet, so different from humans, plants are highly collaborative and generous. But yes, they are. Yes, they are. As research showed, both within their own species as well as through a multitude of collaborations with fungi, insects, and mammals, among others. How could I learn from plants? Well, isn't this a question we ask ourselves every single day? How can I learn from plants? I ask myself that every day. And as Opuntia over here is trying to say to me, I'm over here. I will give you an answer. Yeah, that's what's happening. How could the knowledge of plants inform our workday, our collaborations, our organizations? Is she promoting the naturally conscious community? Seriously. I mean, that's exactly where girlfriend, this is exactly the conversations that we are having in the naturally conscious community. How could I learn from plants? How could the knowledge of plants inform our workday, our collaborations, our organizations? How does he rewrite myths? Right now, we're having a blast, by the way, rewriting the myth of the Garden of Eden. You should come over and participate in that. What general plant strategies can we notice, and which specific plants can we call on to aid and provide with space to act? After some early explorations that invoked taking audiences into the forest, it became clear that I needed to find a different strategy to engage with plants in a way that could truly challenge the automatic, anthropocentric, and romanticized associations around working with plants. This is an important, not only that, the idea that working with plants and not using plants as background furniture. That doesn't work. That doesn't work either. No, it doesn't work. I was searching for a stronger, uncanny, and uncomfortable element which could create a more powerful gesture towards the artistic institutional context and could also speak to the extractivist practices the project was trying to address. This brought me to the decision to work with potted plants. Oh, I really do like her. I do. Opuntia, yes. Yes, we are talking about you. Yes. Okay. Yes. The thing is that in this Opuntia plant, is that Opuntia keeps moving. So it's not just the photo that I showed you of Opuntia leaving over, is that slowly Opuntia is moving towards my computer, like more towards me. I don't know how close you're going to get before you whack yourself against the monitor. So we'll see what happens there. Anyways, this brought me to the decision to work with potted plants and mainly exotic species, Opuntia, that are currently considered trendy. Oh no, Opuntia is not trendy. Opuntia just came from the south, came from the southern part of Italy, down from the Apulia area. Plants in pots appeared to me as a perfect illustration of the absurd perversion of our current societal and cultural state. The potted plant is to many a mere consumer object. This is unfortunately true. True. In the worst case, they are considered disposable. So true. So true. The aesthetics of these plants are seen through the lens of fashion and trends. Witness of this are the countless monsteras and money trees that can be found on Instagram as well as in the garden centers. So true. So true. So true. Is anybody else a little bit like overwhelmed by that? I go through Instagram sometimes and I want to cheer on the fact that I see a lot of plants in my feed. And then every once in a while, like today I looked for a second and I ended up seeing a person who had a type of Monstera in the hand and was like, oh, you're beautiful, but I don't like this leaf, and then was like cutting and was showing people how to like crop things and move things. And I'm sitting there going, no, that's not the point. It's not about bending Montserrat, to your personal beauty standards. Ah, so painful. So painful. So painful. Their individual physical characteristics get homogenized, and they are marked on the basis of properties that are deemed good, read a commodity, for the human consumer, such as their air purifying qualities or the fact that some of them do not need to be watered that often. These exotic species are often connected to colonial past and practices of selection and genetic modification. But the haunting that envelops the potted plant becomes even more apparent when we think of how plants sustain themselves in their relations. Research has shown that plants have intricate and lively systems of exchange and communication, for a large part happen through the root systems and mycorrhizal networks. Through these fine networks of fungal threads in the soil that intertwines with the roots of trees and plants, they exchange nutrients and information. In the pot, the plant is completely dependent on the care of the human owner. Giovanni Alloy has a really great paper about this very topic, like specifically around that relationship and what does it mean for the potted plant to become dependent on the human. Which, of course, we can say this about dogs and cats as well. And yeah, that's another one. But it's a very similar story when you start to realize that they're all sentient. And it really opens up some very difficult conversations. But we're not going to go there. Let's go down the path that's being talked about here. In the pot, the plant is completely dependent on the care of their human owner. They cannot grow in search of water and minerals as they would do outside of pots. In the pot, the plants are completely cut off from their possibilities of communication. No, not completely. Not completely from the possibility of communication through root communication. But we also know that plants have multiple forms of communication, and therefore there is a way for the plant to communicate with others through volatile organic chemicals, through other means, even some of which we as human beings are not yet we're able to measure. Like we know that they're happening. We're not even able to measure them. We're able to know that they're happening based on on how the plants respond, but we don't know how the plants are sending signals yet. We know that plants know of other plants that are near them. So you're not complete. I'm not defending the potted plants as I look around my house, but I am not saying completely cut off but their communication, community interaction, and support. The plants become prisoners. That I agree with to a certain extent. They are stripped of the possibility to care for themselves and each other. By acquiring and working with plants in pots, I'm obliged to acknowledge this perverse dynamic between us from the start. There is no innocence in our co-working. I am complicit in their misdisplacement and will have to find ways to deal with the innate oppressive nature of our relationships. Yeah. I'm totally okay with this conversation because I think it is true. I think it's totally true. And I think it's fair that she's saying it. I struggle, and this is, as you all know, we talk about this a lot. The plants that live with me are all plants that have either been completely rescued because they were on the brink of death, couldn't survive, or have naturally arrived in my house in one way, shape, or another. Like, for example, on my patio every year, we get purslane that arrives, or chickweed, or sorrel, or clover that are all around, and they arrive spontaneously. I don't go off, and I do not contain them. Like if they arrive in a pot, that's where the pot that they're going to grow until they choose to move somewhere else. And that's the best I can do, but I don't go off searching for plants. And I'm constantly looking and asking, do you need to be repotted into something? Do you want to be potted with somebody else? It's a long conversation. A recipe for infiltration by vegetal ghosts. Step 1. Okay. Rooted Hauntology Lab, now I understand why it's called Hauntology Lab, invites you to execute a recipe developed in collaboration with Sepide Ardalani as an attempt to contaminate the institutional time of schedules and 5-year funding plans, the human time, the time of labor, the unnoticed time. This is a recipe for a layered, more than human time. It will help us learn from plant allies and allow us to dream gives space to ghost and non-extractivist future visions. I'm still trying to understand where the ghosts are fitting in here. I do like that they're seances and this is hauntology. Like, I'm okay with the ghosts. I just want to know where they fit in. Depending on the dosage, the recipe can be a medicine, a poison, or a placebo. For our recipe, we invoke 4 particular coworkers or ghosts as you wish. Evening Civil Twilight, Stinging Nettle, Mugwort, and Daisy. Mugwort? Isn't it Mugwort? Mugwort. And Daisy. To execute the recipe, gather the needed coworkers in a small paper or textile bag. The vegetal ghosts can be freshly picked or dried. So in other words, you are just talking about extractivists and all these things, but we have to go off and kill certain plants in order to do this recipe. I am sensing a little bit of non-coherence there. Don't you? Doesn't that seem weird? They can be foraged or store-bought. We invoke Evening Civil Twilight. Who is Evening Civil Twilight? Does anybody know that plant? Evening, I'm going to look it up. Hold on. Civil Twilight. Images? No, I am not getting a plant. Evening Civil Twilight plant? Oops. I am looking it up. If anybody knows who Evening Civil Twilight is, nope, I am not getting anything. So if you know who Evening Civil, I bet you it's a translation, but there must be, I sense a disturbance in the forest. I am with you, Michelle. I am sensing a disturbance in the forest too. So we invoke Evening Civil Twilight. This is, I'm assuming it's a plant of some sort. This is the instant when the geometric center, oh no, it's the Evening Civil, okay, sorry, now I'm getting this. Oh my God, this needs to be a little bit more clear. Evening Civil Twilight, therefore evening civil twilight begins at sunset and ends when the geometric center of the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon. Now I understand. Sunset to when the geometric center of the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon. So this is the instant when the geometric center of the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon. I should have just kept reading. Sorry. It occurs in the morning and in the evening. Evening civil twilight is layered time. The civil in civil twilight points at the light as experienced in the civilized world, the world of civilians, or those whose voices can be heard, those who can vote, those who count. But twilight has many meanings. In German, this translates to either Dämmerung or Zweilig. Zweilig can also be used as an adjective to describe someone as suspicious. If someone dämmers you, you are at the threshold of understanding something at a whole new level. This also exists in English. It dawns on me. And in Dutch, het bengt met de dagen. That's my horrible Dutch. By the way, I don't know how to speak Dutch. We invoke civil twilight to bring the dawn of a new understanding of the civil, including other than human bodies. We invoke civil twilight to leave behind the Eurocentric, anthropocentric, and racist implications of the term civil. We invoke this pertinent time of the evening to bring us new understandings of our time. I like this. So now we're going to go into ghosts. Let's see what the ghosts have to say. Maybe we'll finally figure out what the ghosts have to say. Thinking of plants as ghosts emerged, I already like that sentence. Thinking of plants as ghosts emerged first as a way to counteract the romanticizing of plants, but soon proved to be an unmissable tool to rethink relationships both with the human and other kin. Hauntology gives us some handles to understand how seeming absences and invisibilities influence our experiences and understandings. I got inspired by Derrida, who coined hauntology as a term which points at the idea that everything that exists is also constructed through what it is not. Everything is defined by absence. To haunt is to be present through absence. Ooh, to haunt is to be present through absence. That's. Mark Fisher, in his turn, pointed me towards the importance of time when thinking about ghosts, proposing that hauntology points at a crack in time. The past and future are continuously influencing, haunting the present. Inspired by these readings, I started to consider the relation between the human and the vegetal as ghostly in a variety of ways. Being amongst the plants, the diversity of possible temporal experiences becomes obvious. A plant sometimes takes hours or days to react to an external impulse. A tree grows through numerous human generations. I wonder if a cutting from a plant can be thought of as a new plant or as a continuation of the original plant. Oh, the discussion we're constantly having here with no name Dracaena. Constantly. A moment where linear time branches out. Plants consist of dead parts and living parts and dying parts. And I'm looking at a plant that's on my desk that's in the middle of all of those at the same time, often using their own decaying body as nutrients, and by doing so, bridging the seemingly divide between life and death. We humans should do this too, but we don't allow natural burial in many places. Plants in pots are haunting us with the absence of their ecosystem. Ooh, that's a powerful line. Super powerful line. Plants in pots are haunting us with the absence of their ecosystem. Their communication systems are present, but inaccessible to us without technological intervention. They're not inaccessible to us, but we're not aware of the fact that we are participating in their communications. And this is a really interesting point that I think I'd like for us to think about a little bit more, which is that we are a part of the communication mechanisms that plants have, right? We are a part of bringing in that vegetalness into our being through like when we breathe in volatile organic chemicals, right? When you smell the smelling of the cutting grass, you're hearing those cries for help. When you experience, lying on the grass, you are feeling many of the aspects, and there is a communication that's happening, but we just have very little awareness of what this means. We don't know how our body reacts to these hormones and these chemicals in the air. So yes, we're haunted, but we're haunted by a lack of awareness more than anything, right? Isn't that it? Their lively internal dynamics remain invisible and inaudible for our senses. Again, invisible and inaudible from an awareness perspective, but we're still living it. It's still traversing through our bodies. Thinking plants as ghosts asks us to add an extra dimension to hauntology and the agency of the virtual. We need to branch further outside of no longer and not yet, breaking time and space, opening it up to understand the agency of that which is unseen to the human eye, and therefore could be considered virtual because it is otherkin or other than human. I'm not proposing plants as ghosts in a metaphysical, let alone supernatural way. Oh, darn, we wanted the supernatural part. I'm proposing that plants are ghosts because of their material and physical expression and because of the very material relation to time, life, and death. Simultaneously, there are mainly ghosts in the limited and limiting experience of humans who seem to have developed a plant blindness. Who seem to? Seriously, come on. We know that they've developed a plant blindness. And in doing so, have outcasted plants to the realm of invisibility. This understanding of plants as ghosts is not related to folkloric beliefs or shamanistic practices, including plant spirits. In the worst scenarios, this could be an appropriation and misinterpretation of various indigenous cultural and medicinal practices. I would also want to stay away from any form of essentializing the plant by suggesting it has a spirit which can be seen at its core, its essence, or its most pure expression of self. All right, you had me for a while. Now you're losing me, okay? Why so much fear around the woo? The woo is important. The woo is important. Thinking plants as ghosts, or thinking plants, get it? Like thinking of plants as ghosts, or thinking plants that think as ghosts, allows me to create a broader and more experiential understanding of relationality and the various places plants take within relational frameworks. The figure of the ghost allows us to account for acts and agency that are visible or invisible, present, past, or future. In a haunted world, all relations matter and act. Anna Singh points at a similar potential of seeing ghosts, however, more directed towards their power to counteract forgetting in the introduction of the arts of living on a damaged planet. Ghosts point to our forgetting, showing us how living landscapes are imbued with earlier tracks and traces. Ghosts remind us that we live in an impossible present, a time of rupture, a world haunted with the threat of extinction. Deep histories tumble in unruly graves and are bulldozed into gardens of progress. Powerful. In that sense, the ghosts of plants are diverse and multiple, from the stories they carry because they were gifted by loved ones, to the various complex history they bring to light, or even to their most invisible gift of oxygen, which connects all that lives. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Seeds, for example, are the ghosts of the many forms they could become, but usually can't become because in their potted form, we don't normally allow them to go to seed. And many of those seeds are not viable, which is already an indication that this is not the right way to go. Just so you know, just so you know. Dependent on the conditions in which they were planted. They are the ghost of the flower they once were part of, the ghost of the place they were harvested from, the ghost of the intercontinental travels in colonial past that brought their forefathers here, the ghost of the extinct species that used to carry them across the land, the ghost of the technological fertilizing methods that will multiply them in the future, the ghost of all the conditions in which they will never grow. Through exploring plants as ghosts, I wanted to bring all our unseen relations into consciousness, hoping that this would make us able to respond to them and work with them towards other practices and futures than those which are presented to us. A ghost as full potential and a tool for making change. Step 2. We invoke the ghosts nettle, nettel, orti, or urtica dioica. Urtica dioica. Basically, painful two-headedness. As common and abundant plants in Europe, it is often the first plant to appear on an abandoned plot. Their preference for polluted and nitrate-rich soils makes them the ideal being to reseed the capitalist ruins of pollution and extraction and make space for new features. So does their stinging nature. I mean, come on, isn't that perfect? Like, rise up and sting anyone that tries to take you out of the way. Rise up. Now I have Hamilton in my head. Nettle metabolizes the pollution, which cannot be found back in the picked leaves. Its roots grow very deep and are rhizomic. Really? Rhizomatic, sorry. They're really, I didn't realize that a stinging nettle is a rhizome. Nettles endure and persist. Clothes made from nettles have traditionally been used to bury the dead. Their antibacterial and antifungal properties prevent quick decay of bodies. In that sense, nettles are also archivers of the past. Their sting is a venom that heals. Nettle is widely used for culinary and medicinal purposes. A nettle fritada. They are known as a purifier of the bloodstream and reliever of fatigue. They are also said to help people who are too nice and have difficulties in setting their boundaries wisely. Nettle is one of our spirit wild plants for many of these reasons. Many of these reasons. So if you've done the spirit wild plant quiz, nettle, I'm curious as to if nettle you've matched with nettle, and if you have matched with nettle, I'm so curious as to if you've found some of these characteristics in you. We invoke nettle to set our boundaries within the capitalist demands for even more extraction and production, both of natural and human resources. We invoke nettle to reseed the exhausted space of burnout and create a new perspective on time. Take nettles in your hand, crush the leaf. If you take nettles in your hand and crush the leaves between your fingers, you will burn. That burns your fingers. This is... Now spit in your hands. Our spit and the enzymes in it will allow nettle to slowly ferment, activating their properties. Add the mixture of nettle and spit to your bag. Alrighty then. Being with, occupying a studio with the haunted and misplaced potted plants, I gathered as my co-workers. I figured that in order to learn from them, I had to start off my search by committing to a practice of being with. Being with involves allowing yourself to be touched by the joys and sorrows of another. Oh, that's like my whole life, man. To be touched by external circumstances, or as the Dutch so eloquently said, to be ontroerd. thrown off course by the sheer rawness of the moment, by your by your own inability to make things better, by our fragility, impermanence, and mortality. I want to open myself up to be thrown off course by my vegetal coworkers. Honey, come to my house. This is like an everyday occurrence. And to stick to the ambivalence of our collaboration and what might sprout from that. I start my days in the studio with observing and caring. I attune myself to their presence, to photosynthesis, to the processes that transform CO2 into oxygen, the slow sucking up of moisture by the roots, the drops of condensations rolling of the leaf. I increasingly do less and less. I slow down and try to observe details with full attention, an observation without judgment, without the desire to get something from the other, a radical noticing. Sometimes it feels as if I fold into the plant, my arms interlaced with their leaves, as if I could slip through my own pores to feel the chlorophyll on their surface. They are starting to take over my thoughts. Again, welcome to my world. Welcome to my world. I focus on the silence that now, in between all of these plants, seems much denser. That's an awareness I hadn't thought about. I love the silence. Since I started working with plants, I struggle in homes that have a buzz or a sound of any sort. I lived for a long time in the Sacred Woods Forest in Damanhur, and then in one of the other territories, well, that is now partly Sacred Woods. And I've lived in very small, like little cabins out there. In other words, my room was, and the silence when there's no any kind of city hum, there's no any kind of heating system or cooling system. There's nothing. It's just, it's not silence, because obviously there is the natural world that's going on around you. But I love this definition here of the denseness that you feel. You hear the denseness of the air, of the breathing of the plants, of the just the very natural world. I do that. I look for ways to work with the plants, to work with plants. I put on music, which is supposed to enhance their growth. I take pictures of details, move them around in the space according to my growing attention to their reactions to the light. I pluck away a dead leaf, or I speak to them. I am West European woman who is talking to plants, who expects them to answer her questions. And they will answer your questions. Kin will answer. Just give yourself some time. It is hard to collaborate with beings that seem so quiet to my limited human senses. I feel how loud, but your human senses will expand. Give yourself time. I feel how loud and present I am, and how I continuously try to control the situation through interpretation. Despite the fact that I talk a lot, I have very little to say. In my attempt to communicate, every observation becomes wildly important. A leaf that folds or falls, the speed at which water is being absorbed. Oh my God, this is like my whole life every day. By myself, I have no tools to adequately comprehend the state of the plants. Does something like happiness exist for them? Question that we ask. Is this an ambition I can hold for them? I catch myself in these melancholic, romantic, and anthropomorphic thoughts, betraying my own research. A friend sends me an email with a poem by a name that is probably Polish or Hungarian or something, and I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm not going to butcher, titled The Silence of Plants, which captures my reflections perfectly. But how does someone answer questions which have never been posted? Sorry, I'll start again, but just because of that line, I want to say one of the most beautiful things about teaching communication with the plant world over in many different ways, in many different countries, and in different languages even, has been the beauty of understanding how many times a plant reflects on the question that the human asks and says, that question doesn't have any meaning to us. The idea of certain types of experiences that the plants don't necessarily have, or certain kinds of feelings that the plants don't have, and how beautiful it is that the plant just gently says, I don't have that experience. And this is why. Let me explain to you why that human experience that you're having exists in your world, and why I don't think it exists in mine. And the deep, deep, deep awareness that comes from that, it's been really quite a beautiful thing to see in so many different aspects. I can remember specific experiences in Norway, and experiences in the United States, and experiences here in Italy, and even online, of a question just being asked that the plant was like, You're thinking too human-like. Take a step back. Let's go into this together from a different place. I love it. But how does someone answer questions which have never been posted? And when, on top of that, the one who would answer is such an utter nobody to you? Undergrowth, shrubbery, meadows, and rushes. Everything I say to you is a monologue, and it is not you who's listening. A conversation with you is necessary and impossible. I don't know about impossible. Urgent in a hurried life and postponed for never. The time together with my coworkers have made me overly attentive to the plants everywhere around me. Yay, plant reawakening! Some majestic, other in pitiful state. I developed the habit of watering dried out plants wherever I go. I have the impression the plants are screaming for me from all sides. Welcome to our world. You should come into the naturally conscious community. You will totally love these conversations. This has made me think how their seeming silence is an invitation to develop attitudes of listening. Listening is not passive. It is an action, engaged and committed. This whole thing is a wonderful, 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 wonderful description of a plant reawakening. I love it. I love this part. I don't know where she's going to go with it, but it is a plant reawakening. Listening requires patience, even if we don't fully understand right away what we are listening to or what for. It requires a suspension of one's own desires to dominate or push the other towards what they should be doing, thinking, or saying. Listening is done with the whole body. Listening means staying with the trouble. Okay, almost being with other humans. After almost a year of practicing co-working with plants on my own, the step was taken to broaden the practice of being with two other humans. 3 artists, Spela Petric, Vinnie Jones, and Sepide Ardalani, were invited for a 4-week residency within the building of the DAS Graduate School in Amsterdam. In the selection of the artists, I focused on bringing different knowledges and disciplines around the table, mixing artists who already work with plants and artists who have never worked with plants before. Besides resonating with their artworks and the subjects they work with, I was mainly interested in how these artists were organizing their artistic processes with awareness for the productional context, such as how they work with collaborators, how they strategize and collaborate with partners, their view on finances, use of materials, planning, the role of administration, etc. I also opted for an all-female group from differing generations, since female artists are still systematically underrepresented in the arts fields. Spela is a well-known artist in bioarts and critical plant studies, and has been working with plants and plant governance for many years already. I wanted to collaborate with her around the ethical questions that working with plants has raised all over those years, how the actual physical reality of her vegetal collaborators influences her work, both aesthetically and productionally. And how, or if her collaborating with plants has changed her view on the human in contemporary society. Vinnie Jones is a light artist working with methodologies of sensory sonography. I invited her to extend her research on surveillance, sensory marketing, and how light and space can create subtle behavioral manipulations to the plant-human relationships. This is interesting because Mancuso was doing a light-based project when I was at the laboratory. But it was a little bit, it wasn't like this, but I'm so curious as to where she's going to go with this, because I think that that's very interesting. Through the interactions with biofeedback from the plants, taking into account the limitations of our technical equipment, we investigated notions of agency, control, care, and manipulation. Sepide plays with herbs as ways for her to relate to the vegetal entities whose lives are entangled with ours. Within the context, or I think I'm supposed to say, of Rooted Hauntology Lab, she worked on how to let human sensorial experiences of specific plants speak for themselves, looking for possibilities of bypassing spoken language and how it assigns limits, divides, also divides, and categorizes, yes, lots of categorization, these experiences. The invitation extended to Spela, Vinnie, and Sepide I hope I'm pronouncing their names right, was to explore what being with plants could provoke in their artistic practices and to make an invisible relation visible through co-working with plants. The aim was not to come up with clever new ways of making plant life or plant agency visible through an artwork, but rather to question ways of working and meeting audiences drawn from the realizations of our co-working partners. Already, I like this. This is really interesting. I don't know about what you're thinking, but I find this fascinating because I feel like this is an evolution. And already we see it, right? This is 2021 when this paper came out. This is an evolution to many of the conversations we've had up until now, 2018, 2017, which are really much more rudimentary in their initial experiences with plants. And this is already taking it to another level of evolution as to the questions being asked and the relationship being had with the plants. Within the residencies, being with meant suspending the desire to come to conclusions or agreements about the problems raised. Being with plants brings to light the difficulties of power relationships that are always at play, both in artworks themselves as well as in collaborations. Approaching plants as ghosts and committing to making the invisible realities visible meant that we have to find ways to make the power relations we experienced an explicit part of the work. Within the residency, our relating to plants still mainly happen through the use of plants or projection of human attributes onto them and their well-being, while the experiences of the plants themselves remained absent, unable to be voiced, let alone understood. I think that Ingrid is doing herself a disservice here in assuming that over time, the plant interactions will continue to be inaudible, invisible, and not understandable. I think she's just the same as you don't want to consider that it is a given that this will happen, which something we tend to do over at NCC because we have worked with plants for so long. We have this other understanding and their other belief system. I think for when you're starting, I think you should allow yourself just as much space to believe that it could happen to the fact that it hasn't happened yet or that it might not. Because I think if you continue to have this thought process that it is impossible, then you are putting your own biases into it in a different way, right? I just think that from reading this, I like so much what they're doing. I wish at least you would give space to saying today, the plant is a ghost because the reactions and experiences are absent from my ability to understand, unable to be voiced and let alone understood. But it doesn't mean that it will remain that way over time. And I really wish she would give herself the space for doing that. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it's just my opinion on that. In Sympoiesis' practice of picking, drying, tincturing, and ingesting plants, she looked for answers to this relation of unidirectional use. She writes in the program note of the seance, in the case of phytofraction, the medicine lies in the imagination of vegetal transgressions towards the human. When mutualizing the agency to transgress, maybe the healing can be mutualized too. Rechanneling the healing capacity to not flow one directionally from plant to human, but as to an interface between the vegetal and human, maybe drinking an infusion of elderflowers can perform mutual healing. Maybe the potential for transgression acted out of the vegetal towards the human could possibly help to imagine plant agency with plasticity. And this is interesting that she writes about this because we were, when I teach, for example, communication with the plant world, one of the elements that I do bring in is that one of the first exercises we do is a type of infusion of a message to the plants. And as a matter of fact, even in this artist that I was talking about that is going to be Antonio Irre, who I interviewed for the podcast next week, we talked about we talked a lot about this because one of his first projects that he ever worked on in bringing plant-inspired art into the city, actually that's not true, plant communication and interaction with humans into the city, it was something where he was trying to shift the direction, where it wasn't just the human taking from the plant, but the human giving back to the plant. And I think, and as those of you who've taken Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, which is inside of the Naturally Conscious community in Blooming Sprouts, knows that that's the whole purpose of Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom. It's to create two-way conversation for us to be able to hear the vegetal mind, to be able to develop tools, which is why I say that this, approaching this project, starting with the idea that it is impossible for you to actually listen and receive from the plant, and for you to be able to then conversely communicate back with the plant, I think is a shame. It's just a shame. It's just a shame. Because it just limits. Similarly, Spela questions the relational framing between herself, the plants, and the audience. Which one would plants approve of? Science, paganism, market economies? Wouldn't a verbal narrative go against my personal experience with plants, one that made me realize precisely the opposite? The semantics of our logos limit the understanding of their syncretic being? In Vinnie's research, it is the human artist who makes choices and attributes values to the information she receives in the form of biofeedback, choosing which data is translated into a specific light or color. But is it? It doesn't have to be. As a person who's worked with the music of the plant, you can allow the plant to make that choice. You can say, send me a signal that tells me what you want blue to be. And, and then assign that symbol to blue. I mean, there are ways to go through this. I feel, okay, I still have to remember this is 2021, and it's just a first step. It's a first step. She aims to equalize the hierarchies between humans and plants within her work by equally manipulating both, prompting her to state, it is a fascinating idea that light can be designed to elicit specific human responses, such as increased concentration, productivity, and creativity. The optimizing of these functions is now included in workplace light design, in public space and retail. Light is being used to promote specific behaviors and discourage others. It is not only plants that are being shaped in greenhouses. Well, that's pretty cool. That's true too. Despite our best intentions of care, the options we are left with is maybe a cautious humility rather than a certitude of claiming that our acts are caring rather than oppressing. Staying with the uncertainty of the effect of our actions is possibly a first step in shifting the power dynamics that lie between us and the plants and between all of us as collaborators. The experience and problems of the residency were opened up to an audience during a 14-hour-long seance at Zone to Source, an art space focusing on the intersections of art, science, and nature in Amsterdam. The word seance hints at both the summoning of ghosts as well as the common meaning of the word in French, a session. The term was chosen to emphasize that this is not an event nor a service or entertainment. It was not created to be consumed. A ghostly seance needs its participants' commitment and conviction. It demands you be with every entity in it, even if we don't know what will appear. A seance asks us to suspend any disbelief we might hold. It is a playful, serious business, creating a ghostly loophole in reality that has the potential to haunt on for a long time. We extended the invitation to be with to the audience through proposing different economies of attention. The audience was not presented with finished artworks ready for consumption, but various ways of entering into dialogue with the research of the lab and all the entities, present, absent, human, other than human, that had been part of the research, including the necessary invisible labor such as cleaning and making food. The notion of time was of great importance. The 14-hour timeline allowed us to stretch the conventional economy and experience of time within an artistic encounter. Presentations, which included sound pieces, lectures, performances, installations, and participatory exercises, were either durational or spaced at least 2 hours apart, leaving ample space for the audience to exchange, take a nap, leaf through the library, make copies of texts, or engage with the human and vegetal co-workers. At least 2 hours apart. So they did things and then they had 2 hours breaks, and then they did things and they had 2-hour breaks. Interesting. This approach also created the kinds of tensions that come with being with. Some audience members were confused about what was happening now or where the exhibition was. Audience members were invited to sign a commitment to be with all entities present, offering people the space to attune to the multitude of things happening that seemed invisible at first. As the day went on, more and more audience members appeared to become co-hosts by making time for conversation with newly arriving guests or by reading together. On a foraging walk in the park, everyone was invited to bring their knowledge of edible plants or lack thereof. As we were walking through the park, enjoying the green surroundings and focusing in on the plants that would later become part of our collective dinner, we contemplated how our relationship with plants is not self-evident. The park had designated wild spots where nettles and wild garlic were allowed to take over. But these attempts at wilderness were in fact highly curated with the context of manicured park built in the Florade in 1972, the biggest international garden architecture experience. And this is what we see all the time, right? We know this. Our wildness is almost always contained and often very curated. It's very rare that we allow our own wildness to really explore, and therefore our own city spaces are areas where we kind of do mock wildness, but in fact, we don't necessarily allow for true wildness for whomever it is that may arrive in those spaces. Even as I was talking earlier, how in my balcony, there's many visitors and visiting plants that arrive every year. And even though I try to give them space, every once in a while, there's a pot where I'm like, hey, can you not go here because I'm trying to do this thing that I'm working with a plant on? Can I move you over there? And sometimes I listen and sometimes I still don't. I mean, I'm very honest about that. I try. I'm trying. I'm still learning and growing myself. Still learning and growing myself. Being in the midst of these plants, enjoying their presence and being attuned to them also made the act of eating into a more conscious confrontation with our day-to-day exchanges with the vegetal. Plants are building us on the most basic level. Through their death, they're being transformed into us and we into them. In the act of eating itself, the binary opposition between the human and plant that seems almost unavoidable when using language starts to dissolve. That's it. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. All right, step 3. We invoke the ghost Mugwort. I'm still thinking she's saying Mugwort. Bijvoet, Fuju, Artemisia. Artemisia vulgaris, sorry, I didn't read on. I didn't even read the next sentence. Is considered a protector of women and forest creatures. For people who farm or garden, they are an enemy since they survive any herbicide you spray at them. From a spiritual perspective, they're pretty amazing. The oils of the plant are toxic when taken in large amounts over a long period of time. But in small dosages, they are considered to assist with dreaming, imagining, and visioning. Those who use mugwort are said to be able to live in several worlds at once. We invoke mugwort to expand our gaze to past and future. We invoke mugwort to make the invisible visible. We invoke mugwort to help us stay with the trouble and live in complexity. We invoke mugwort to resist the tyranny of linear time and constant now. Take some mugwort in your hands and warm them up by rubbing your hands together. The warmth will activate the chemicals inside mugwort so they become more volatile. Now inhale the smell for 7 long breaths. Put mugwort in your bag and sweep your hands across your forehead to allow the leftover oils of the plant to seep through the skin into our brains where they can do the work. We do that. We do that as part of a ritual. Interesting. Okay. Attuning with generosity. In terms of thinking about curational position in general, I worked with the idea of vegetal generosity. Michael Martyr, hey, eventually they had to cite him because everybody cites Michael Martyr. Michael Martyr proposes that plants are ontologically generous. Generosity is what they are. Yes. In their act of growing, can produce excess, the conditions for both themselves and other entities to thrive. In collaboration with microorganisms and mycelium, plants have created the foundations for other life on Earth to emerge. Without plants, no oxygen-rich atmosphere for mammals to breathe. I would like to imagine a vegetal generous mode of performance curating, producing excess and providing the conditions for both artists and audiences to thrive, to connect and exchange. A practice not only concerned with its own life forms, but making it life possible for others, humans and other than human alike. However, the desire for generosity also brings vulnerability. What can be a generous attitude in the face of possible exploitations is to not give 3 shits about the exploitations. I know that's kind of idealistic. There's more there, but I'm not going to go off on a side tangent on it, although I could. Because seriously, we worry a little bit too much, and exploitation is always going to This is where working with plants can be extremely useful, by the way, because when we see the models that plants provide for what generosity really looks like, it helps us understand how to curb exploitation through the process of being so open and generous. It is possible. Mm, mm, mm. What kinds of generosity can we foster from situations of precarity? The inspiration for the vegetal generosity translated itself towards the artist by first of all allocating 80% of the budget towards artist fees. Even though in this case we are talking about the very small production budget that was provided by the graduate school, this was symbolically of great importance since artists are often left unpaid. In this case, are you counting the plants as the artists since you call them collaborators? Did they get paid too? I would like that question answered, please. Just because it helps understand how far you went in the game. How far did you go? Secondly, generosity could be found in how time and attention were distributed during the residencies. While resisting extractivist and precarious practices of offering more time and energy than we could actually give, it became a matter of what we spent our time and attention on, being generous to the process of its questions rather than focusing and putting pressure on the outcome. Through organizing feedback sessions for each other and sharing reference information, but also collectively sewing the curtains needed for Sepida's installation. Within the seance, this generosity became an invitation to an audience to approach all elements present, visible and invisible, as a commons. This invitation was also woven into the details of hosting and in overarching scenography of the space. Sorry, I got caught up by Michelle's comment. Plants don't need our filthy lucre. It's not the point. It's the point of it, not necessarily the action itself. And you know that. And you know that. There was a library consisting of all the books and texts made up of the research. The various notes and mappings from the whole process were present for people to browse through and use. A copy machine of the office supplies made it possible for people to make their own reader. Nothing of this process was hidden. All was offered up to become oxygen or humus. This open source, excuse me, hold on a second. Are you going to start yelling? I'm still cat sitting my friend's cat, and my friend's cat just walked in yelling at me because she's saying it's past my food time. It's past my food time. Anyway, nothing of this process was hidden. All of it was offered up to become oxygen or humus. The open source approach was mirrored by the space, which had no backstage or invisible organizational labor. The chairs, tables, and cushions could be moved around by the audience to fit the needs of the different presentations taking place, and cleaning and care tasks were shared. In the program, generosity was present in the brief for the various lectures, making sure they were understandable to the different levels of knowledge and expertise present, and offering time for discussion and collective exercises that could translate the philosophical and scientific concepts presented into everyday life. Sepide was available to audience members to consult for more information on herb practices and the herbal drinks and herb rooms she had set up. All of these curational choices were small gestures aimed at shifting habits of consumption into practices of commoning. The space, the time, remember they're in there for 14 hours. This is how they set it up, with 2 hours in between each activity. Plenty of time to develop this space for commoning. And I think that it is being together for 14 hours that helps create that environment. We don't give ourselves the space and time, which is exactly what we're constantly talking about the need for us to give time for relationships, specifically plant-human relationships, but really all relationships need time to develop. So it makes sense that it took them 14 hours to create this feeling of commoning in the commons to exist. The space, the time, the artwork, artists, plants, books, other audience members, etc., became something we collectively benefit from and care for. So, Sympoiesis, I love this title. Sympoiesis, poiesis, and distributed authorship. Donna Haraway describes Sympoiesis as a simple word. It means making with. Nothing makes itself. Nothing is really autopoietic or self-organizing. I don't know, man. Fritjof Capra might argue with that point. Nothing is really autopoietic. He says everything is autopoietic or self-organizing. Earthlings are never alone. Well, that is true. That part I get. I get it. This is the radical implication of sympoiesis. Sympoiesis is a word proper to complex, dynamic, responsive, situated historical systems. It is a word for wording with, in company. Sympoiesis enfolds autopoiesis and generativity unfurls, and extends it. And that makes more sense, right? Because we do react kind of feels like individually, but we're always reacting with and of and from. It's like what I always say, it is important for us to remember that I am always in nature, observing nature, and simultaneously am nature. Therefore, everything I do always comes from those three points of intersection that are always happening, whether I'm aware of them or not. The invitation to co-work with plants in order to make an invisible relation visible is an attempt at a conscious and specific sympoiesis. Plants make our symbiotic, poietic. It's so hard to say some of these words. Sympoietic reality, our becoming with our environment visible and tangible. The plant's living form is a constant interpretation, evaluation, and exploration of their surroundings. Within the residency process, the artistic researchers and the seance, the 14-hour seance, we attempted to be as conscious and acknowledging as we could towards what was creating with us. Through the act of inviting the artist with a specific question, the creation of peer spaces in which the individual artistic practices could take place, and the attention for sympoiesis, we could see a different possibility of authorship emerge between us that I would for now describe as a variety of distributed authorship. Vinny worked on a light installation operated by biofeedback from the vegetal co-workers. Why are the vegetal called co-workers and the three humans are called artists? In this particular case, aren't they all artists? Again, language. Sorry, I'm parsing language. I know it's probably not important, but I'm just curious. I'm curious as to what you think about that. It just seems a little bit weird. That provided the light environment for the whole duration of the seance. The light frequencies we used varied between those seen as most beneficial for plant health and those considered most beneficial for human well-being. The light installation also, but didn't the plants able to were the plants able to, I thought the plants were able to control it. The light installation also communicated with the light coming from outside, since the glass house in which Zone to Source is operating has 3 full glass walls opening out to the surrounding park. Sepide proposed herb rooms inside and outside of the space, in which audience members were invited to encounter specific vegetal beings through the different senses of taste, touch, smell, and sight. What I find fascinating here is how easy it is for us to fall into this trap. On the one hand, they're trying to create beingness with plants, right? So at one point, like losing the separation of human and plant titles into co-workers and just all of us as persons that are participating. And at the same time, they have all these different titles and experiences that are actually separating. The fact that you put plants in a room, or that you talk about the plants in a room type setting, already separates the us and the them, right? The fact that you just don't allow the plants to be in the space and participatory in the space, and allow the plants over time, if you would have put the plants into the space earlier and allowed the plants to grow into the spaces wherever they wanted to go. I know you can't do that to a certain extent unless you give lots of time, but it's still interesting how much control there is in all of this. And I know, again, baby steps, and it's still huge steps. And I think it's great what they're doing. I'm just showing how easy it is for us to fall into the trap of still kind of looking at things through that way. The audience was asked to contemplate the naming of the encounter through the information they got from these sensorial interactions. Spela proposed a meditative exercise followed by a lecture on Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, and guiding us to her conclusion and provocation that in the eyes of the algorithm, we are all plants. We are all plants. I am plant. We humans and other than humans alike are all the vegetariate, a new precariat, raw material to be mined by the algorithm, generously giving away this excess of data. Oh man, we're going to have to dissect that whole thing in another moment. That's, yeah, we're going to have to dissect that one. That one's, we are, they're humans, raw material. Doesn't this just label us by the labels that we don't want to label plants with? The invited artists proposed three distinct approaches to the question to make something invisible visible. Their autonomous artistic processes were made porous through consciously acknowledging the multiple influences which make a work. In this case, in specific, the vegetal co-workers and each other. This is something very different than a simple co-authorship or co-creation. Each of the invited artists came with their own autonomous artistic proposal, but their processes were opened up, influenced, and contaminated by each other. They all testified afterwards that what they created within the context of Rooted Hauntology Lab was something very different than what they thought they would make otherwise. The curational work then was not to weave these distinct artworks together into a single narrative, but rather the opposite, to create the conditions for work to emerge together and speak to each other through their rooting in the common soil. This distributed authorship was further emphasized by mentioning our distinct vegetal co-workers in their credits, as well as writers who have been significant to the project. The presence of the library made the influences and research of the project visible and accessible to all. Also, the audience was encouraged to become an author of the seance by leaving traces in the space, adding questions, and making proposals. And see, this is what I'm talking about, where the plants invited the same, where they were given the same liberties to become authors of the seance, to leave traces in the spaces, to add questions, to make proposals, for people to actually listen to what the plants had to say to this. I think that they did an excellent job. And this is a really interesting, live laboratory art, living art, or live art, as Julia Matera, who is this week's podcast guest, talks about. But I still think that you're missing the fact that over time, it's easy to naturally fall back into the human words and the human divisions that we separate things out to. On a more subtle level, the dramaturgy and rhythm of the whole seance was based on the positioning of the sun. In reality, the seance had already started the evening before through the means of a lecture performance sharing for a recipe for vegetal infiltration with the audience. By starting off the seance in the late evening before, the night and time of dreams were taken along into the dramaturgy of the whole. The timing of the different interventions was made with the specific location of sun during the day and the energy it gives or takes in minds. I'm sorry, but didn't we talk about in the beginning of Ghosts that we weren't talking about things from a paranormal perspective, but yet you're taking in the position of the sun from an energetic perspective? There's a lot of contradictions in this paper. I wish always that there would be a piece at the end in the conclusion that was about the contradictions and their inevitability based on where the researcher is, not as a point of punishment or as negativity, but more as a point of observational exploration. That is, this is where I am today, and I recognize now that there is something missing there and that I hope to be able to move forward in the future. This is just my opinion. The seance wanted to be more than the sum of its parts. It aimed to be a temporary ecosystem where the different curational, artistic, and social elements were clearly distinguishable, but their relations to each other were also clear and celebrated. Through all of these subtle interventions and experimental practices, the seance proposed the audience encounter of an opportunity to create together, to create with those who are recognized as present and with the ghosts. Invisible to the audience, a different kind of writing together was happening on the administration level. But didn't you say that during the seance, nothing was hidden? In an attempt to be conscious about relationality within the aspects of how we were organizing ourselves, and were being organized by what surrounded us, of course, we attempted to make contracts that could describe all of our relations and temporary agreements within the process, rather than the contract being a dry description of financial transactions. Where a normal residency or co-production contract focuses on the financial and legal obligations, what just happened? Go away. And legal obligations towards each other, we started to compile the different human needs and desires that we held for our collaboration, as well as the unsolved issues and the ideas that we did not manage to develop. The contract was continuously adapted to become a trace of the collaboration. Rooted Hauntology is an ongoing project, is a cautious, hold on a second, sorry. 19. Rooted Hauntology Lab, as an ongoing project, is a cautious and humble attempt at rehashing different ways of relating in a time and place where relating can no longer be claimed as innocent. Rooted Hauntology Lab is bound to fail. These first experiments have also pointed out the blind spots. Okay, good. Maybe they just do what I asked, such as the difficulty to find alternatives to an anthropomorphizing of the other than humans and the lack of ways to deal with the power relations in which we are entangled. Oh, okay. Sorry, exactly what I said. Reverse back what I said before, because it sounds like they're actually doing it. Time and time again, we would notice there was use of human and other human resources without the certainty of consent. There were expectations placed on each other. There was not enough money or time. There was audience members who might have needed more information or more food. There were plants who died, roots that rotted, soil that dried out, bugs that were squashed, Facebook that was used, and a plane that was taken. An intern who was put under pressure. Thinking ourselves, our work, our responsibilities through all of our relations is overwhelming and confronting. There is no easy way of navigating the haunted world we find ourselves in, but we may create spaces to exercise our attentive to ghostly relations. We may exercise what it means to act on them and to shift how we live and work. For this, we may find allies in the vegetal world. This is step 4. We invoke the ghost Daisy, Margetica, Gansblümchen. Bellis perennis is a well-known garden guest of springtime. Historically, daisy has been commonly known as in English as bruisewort and occasionally wanderwort, revealing that they can help with bruises and close wounds. Time travel and future pre-rehearsal is not without its dangers. We invoke Daisy to teach us to cultivate softness and receive softness as well. We invoke Daisy to teach us the continuing possibility for joy, even in uncertainty. Take Daisy and stroke them across your face very gently. Give them the softness of your skin and receive the softness of their petals in turn. When you feel you are ready, add Daisy to your bag. Close your bag tightly. Press it against your right temple. Put it in your agenda or in your laptop bag, somewhere where you will find them the next time you enter an institution or start your work. Take the time to get to know these vegetal ghosts. Know that you have the potential to make space for them. Open the door for them to infiltrate, to take over. Allow yourself to be influenced by their potential for change and the creation of other timescales and practices. Interesting. This is Rooted Hauntology Lab's attempts at vegetal curation. I am so curious as to what your thoughts are on this. So curious, because as an experiment, as a live art piece, I think they did an excellent job. Honestly, I think that based on the difficulty of what they are doing, of melting away this divisionatory, I don't even think that's a word. This divisive, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I really feel like they did a good job as a first level, and I believe if they would do this seance again, I think first of all, they could go even further with the recipe. I think that they, even within the recipe itself, forgot. With Daisy, it's slightly different, but just the fact that you pluck or forage for these plants without consent, the recipe does not involve consent, I think already sort of starts it a little bit tainted. But I think if you would just modify slightly to be spend time with, go find mugwort and spend time with mugwort, go send, and then ask at the very end of that, like, period of acquaintance, I'm doing this work. Can I invite you into it? And then forage if the plant says yes. I think if you were to do that for nettle, for mugwort, for daisy, which I think are relatively easy to do because they grow in most places, I think the whole tone of it would be slightly different. And then from there, the introduction of other plants into the actual seance. I find that they didn't discuss which plants were invited into the seance. And was it just these 4 vegetal co-workers? Was it only after that they were foraged? What were the live plants that were that were the other artists that were with them? It's a start. I think this is a great, yes, it's a start. I completely agree here, Michelle. This is a start. And I really like what Jill says, plants are teaching us to navigate emotional landscapes. And I do think that this is a beautiful, beautiful attempt at moving through a landscape where you are aware that you are not seeing it, that you are not completely present in it, and therefore there is a lot more nuance to your blindness that is not just general plant blindness. And I think, and also just the fact of trying to create a commons in general, I already think that that's a beautiful way of starting it. So I do think that there's a lot that they did very nicely here. It's a start. I mean, I think there's no other way of saying it. It is a start, and I very much appreciate this start. I appreciate what they're trying to do, and what I really am curious. This was 2021. Whether they've attempted it again, how have they worked through it, and what does it look like? But yeah, I think this is great. I'm happy. I'm happy to see this. So it's more movement, it's more space, it's more things that are happening, and it's totally something that we need. We need more of. So I'm glad. I think for now, this is the last paper in this round. Let me take a quick look. That is going to be kind of performance-y spaced, because I have a whole series of other papers that are, yeah. There's a few papers that are going to be coming up that are going to take us into a lot of different areas, because, as I said, we're now heading into 2021, where there is much more awareness and the birth of the critical plant studies in a whole new explosive way. So we're going to be playing around a little bit with some technical papers. I have a few papers that are about, the vascular nature of plants, but also connected to the sociality print of it, and also plants that are really about the kind of vegetal geography and other elements of this paint. I need to organize them, because in 2021, a lot of papers came out. And so I want to kind of put together the best order. You can't even imagine the ones that are coming out right now. 2023 already had an explosion of super amazing papers, which is why I keep saying to you that I don't see how I can continue to do this. Either I do really, really, really long streams, which is a possibility, or I start to do more streams during the week. I am so looking forward to trying to get my schedule to work better so that I can do more streams during the week, because right now there's no way with the way that my schedule is set up. But I'm excited and I'm hopeful, because I feel like there's so much more for us to go through here. Plus, I want to be able to get into some really interesting conversations with all of you. I mean, I want to be able to have, the comments and have that relationship back, because I do think that there's a lot of discussions that we can be having. Obviously, the most places before that we're doing, we have all of our specific situations, and let me rephrase this. Hold on. We have so many opportunities now to be able to have these discussions. Jill brings up the idea of having things that are interactive before and after. But for that, really, Jill, that's exactly what the Naturally Conscious community is for, right? That is exactly why we do our budding artistry on the second Wednesday of every month, as part of the Sprouts writing and creativity group. That is why we have, all of the different writing times and our co-working spaces. But it's also where we're having the master classes that we're rewriting right now, our Garden of Eden mythology. So we have a lot of opportunities inside of the Naturally Conscious community to do something that's extremely interactive, because I agree with you. We need to sit and draw and talk and be amongst the ghosts. And I'm really enjoying the idea that the fact that we have so many of these types of events going on inside of NCC to really allow us to be with the ghosts, to be with the plants. I don't know if I really love the idea that she calls them ghosts. I mean, I see why she calls them ghosts, but I don't know if I really love it. But I do agree with you that we need to spend that time. So here we're going to be going through the papers. Here we're going to be sharing what is coming out from the scientific world and from the artistic world, connecting to the plant humanities and critical studies and all these different elements. That is exactly what this space is for. But you absolutely come into the Naturally Conscious community if then you want to metabolize them, if you want to integrate what it is that we're experiencing, what we're learning, what does this feel like, what does it do, how does it change in your life. That is all the different programs that we have in NCC. And that's why I love being in NCC. I love that we have a space where we can talk about this, but also where we can create. We need to be able to create with other kin. We need to be able to explore through art and music and sound and movement movement. We need to be able to have a space where we can have these discussions of like, well, what happens when I feel this thing from this plant and I don't understand what that means? What are the questions to ask? How do I explore these? These are so important for our growth, because as you saw from this own paper that came out, is the fact that generosity is a core construct of the vegetal being. And therefore, if we want to have a more just and generous society, what better beings to try to look to than the vegetal world? I mean, that's one of the main places for us to go and look. And again, looking at, Apuntia and how, where's that photo again? So that I can show you of what Apuntia is trying to show me. Like, look at that. This is a plant that is growing towards me, telling me things. We need to listen. And so we need spaces where we are going to learn the science. We're going to explore the art. We're going to metabolize that. We're going to discuss it. We're going to bring it into ourselves. We need it all. We need it all. And so I am excited that you are here and participating in this. And I am extremely excited that you go back into the naturally conscious community and you become a part of this exploration and of this conversation, because that is it. That's the best way. Like, that's how we bring this into the real world and how we actually start to work and collaborate and create with these amazing, amazing, amazing vegetal beings that surround us all around. So yeah, that's it. That's the way that it looks at. I mean, I think that that's the way to look at it completely, that we need that. So Jill asks, what if each place we lived had a ghost around us as well? Each of our jobs, people of the past last as a ghost in our memory. Absolutely. And I think that that's what they were trying to say. The reason that they brought up this whole concept of the ghost in this paper is because the whole premise of the ghost is the fact that we have ghosts all around us. The idea that the ghost haunts us, right, is the absence in the present is such a strong idea. And the fact that for many people, one part is plant blindness. I don't see you at all. And then when you start to step into your plant reawakening, it is true. You have a period of you're haunted because you have these beings that you now see, but you feel disconnected from still. You still don't know how to interact, how to connect, how to work with. And so it makes perfect sense that ghost for them was the metaphor, the just metaphor for you to work with. I actually think it's a brilliant metaphor, and I think it has a lot of merit to the way that they looked at it. So thank you so much for all of you that were here. I thank you for, your subscriptions, your likes, your comments, and also for coming over to the Naturally Conscious community, continue on these conversations. I, of course, will always have everything in the show notes. So as soon as everything gets processed, I will be able to upload it, and we'll put it into both the Naturally Conscious community on my website as well as on YouTube, so that you can go back and watch it and see it, because of course we love the replays. And please make sure you like and subscribe and share. Please share, because we want this to be a growing movement. We want everybody who's looking for better plant-human relations to find a place where they can have these conversations and where they can feel supported through their journey. And also, if you are yourself struggling through something and if there's something I can help you with as a nature-inspired mentor and a coach, please reach out to me. I am always around, and I am always here to help you on your journey, because that is, my life purpose is to be a bridge to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. And my co-conspirators are the plants that help me get there. So that's it for me. Next week, remember, we will not be here because in the Naturally Conscious community, we have the final discussion of our current reading selection in the Plant Wisdom Book Club. We have Tree Spirits, Grass Spirits by Hiromi Ito that we are finishing up. We will be concluding that book, and we will be announcing the next book. Also, if you join the Plant Wisdom Book Club, you can vote for what the next book is. So head on over to NCC and you will also find that. Again, I'll put that all into the show notes. And so we will not be meeting because the final discussion takes place at the exact same time that we are here normally. And so we will be picking up again in 2 weeks' time. But until then, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance, and make sure to check out the podcast and all the old episodes of this plant consciousness commentary. This is me, Tigria Gardenia. I am out. I'll see you soon in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone. Bye.